So, welcome to 12 and a half kick-ass sustainability ideas for 2026, which is the introduction to our Net Zero Business Academy series of webinars, but it's a standalone session as well, aimed to not only give you a flavor of what we do, but give you a sort of fill up at this grim point of the year. For those of us in the UK anyway, it's pretty dreek outside. Who am I? We have been, sorry, I have been working in sustainability for, I think it's 27 years. I have written 5 books on the subject, some of which will be touched on today. In fact, the original set of webinars I set called Green Academy were based on the structure of the Green Executive, but it has evolved over time because, as you can see the difference in the beard color from the picture with my first book and beard color now, that was quite a while ago. Being a middle-aged man, I host a podcast because it is the law. It's called the Net Zero Business Podcast. I encourage you all to check it out. We publish a new episode every Friday. 3 out of 4 are interviews with interesting people, and the fourth one is me on my own. So some of the content you will see in here is taken directly from the podcast, because that's why I started actually, to get some fresh content in, because it's great. You get to talk to a new person every week at least. So my company, Terra Firma Limited, have had a whole load of blue chip companies. We work in sustainability and strategy, employee engagement, professional development, and then we have an overall umbrella term, the Net Zero Accelerator, where we come in and try and sort out your problems. The, on the normal sessions, we don't have advertising like this, but because this is a freebie, you have to put up with me blowing my own trumpet a bit. This is what Net Zero Business Academy looks like. As well as this session, there are 10 other sessions. Each of them has a theme, unlike this one, which is general. And we, I think they're pretty self-explanatory now, but we go through supply chain strategy, employee engagement, all sorts of things. These are some of the people we have had on Net Zero Business Academy, or formerly Green Academy. Some big names in there, some of which have gone on to become clients as well. So it's quite a we've had quite a chunky representation of the great and the good over the years. So that's the rest of the preamble. We're going to get on to our 12 and a half kick-ass sustainability ideas. But first of all, the workbook, and this is quite an important part of Green Academy, sorry, Net Zero Business Academy, and the header has not been fixed. It was called Green Academy until recently. So as we go through, I will ask you to think about each of the ideas and how you might apply them in your organization. There's 2 other boxes. One is opportunity, so all the upsides, high, medium, low, and risk, which sort of I'm using the downsides, cost, risk, could things go wrong, etc., etc. How you define high, medium, low is up to you. That's a purely subjective decision, but it's this kind of quick and dirty assessments we do within the Net Zero Business Academy, because we're limited in time. We're pushing everything into an hour, so we have to do all these things quickly. I won't be pausing in this one because we've got a lot to get through, so do try and complete that as we go on. You may get a 10-second pause while I force some liquid down my throat to keep my throat going, but that's all we'll get. In the proper sessions, the workbook is more structured. Generally, there's one other one that's a bit like this, and we take a bit more time over the exercises. But 12 and a half, I'll talk about the half later. We have to get through an awful lot, so we won't be pausing so much. Right. Okay, number 1 is what I call the sweet spot of sustainability success. And that is to find the overlap, this nice Venn diagram between sort of net zero, sustainability, all the rest, and the interests of your business. And that's in that overlap is where you should start all your efforts, whether it's your strategy or anything else. And that might seem obvious, but some people think that if you are doing things which deliver net zero and are good for your business, then it is somehow greenwash. Those people are idiots. Don't listen to them. It's really important to find that sweet spot because if you hit a couple of bumps in the road, if your sustainability net zero strategy is seen to be delivering for the business, then it's much less likely to get chucked off the wagon or whatever the analogy wants to be. So, the very first session, we help you find that sweet spot of success using our business case model, which goes up from basic compliance through cost, staff recruitment, investors, winning business, new markets. We go through all of that in the first session. But the idea number one here, the one you should be thinking about and filling into your workbook, is what are the most important drivers for you to embrace sustainability? Because most people treat these as all the same, whereas actually, for a lot of organizations, there's priorities. So you need to prioritize them. We'll explain a lot more of that in session one, but just think what are the biggest drivers on your organization, or if you're a consultant on a client's organization, to go for sustainability stroke net zero, and how you might want to adjust your strategy to match that. Number two, I have found that the easiest quick wins are to take away the barriers to sustainability. Again, that might sound really simple, but some people, purists, seem to think, that sustainability should be this high priesthood that you have to go through initiation rites and all the rest of it and speak special language in order to get in. Make it as simple as possible for people. So, green tape. This is still my favorite case study, even though it's a bit long in the tooth. But I was working with a major organization which had sites all over the UK, and they had invested in teleconferencing suites. This was before COVID, before Zoom and Teams, etc., became a big thing. And I was running workshop with them, and we talked about teleconferencing. And a guy got up and he was really angry and started yelling at, I tell you why I don't use that bleep bleep thing is because it is a pain in the bleep bleep. And it turned out that in order to work out the cost effectiveness of teleconferencing, if you wanted to book the suite, you had to calculate the cost of the meeting you weren't having. So you had to work out where everybody was coming from, how long they would travel, how much that would cost in staff, travel costs, accommodation, subsistence, and all the rest of it. And you had to feed that in. Whereas if you wanted to have the physical meeting, you could just put it in everybody's Outlook and they had to sort all that out. It wasn't a bother, so nobody was using it. They took that green tape away, and the next thing they had to do was double the capacity of the teleconferencing system because so many people wanted to use it. So eliminate barriers with extreme prejudice. And the best way to find out where the barriers are to ask people, which we will talk about a bit more in a second. So that's idea number two. Number three is how to sell sustainability to absolutely anyone. If you have been in one of my workshops, I open almost every workshop with this little technique. I get a flip chart, a blank page. I write at the top, why are we here? And I explain I don't mean in a sort of metaphysical sense. I am talking about why does your organization, or organizations plural, want to take sustainability seriously? And then I shut up, which is the most important part. And I wait, and somebody will say something like, well, we could save some money. So I write that up on the flip chart and say, how would you save money? And we talk about that for a while. And then I say, any other reasons? And basically, I keep doing that until we have done that business case that I showed you in under idea number one. And then we talk about which are the most important drivers. And that does a lot of things. It gives me massive insight into the organization. But most importantly, those people in the room have sold sustainability to themselves. And that is gold dust. The ones who are quiet, who may not be convinced, will hear their peers saying, well, actually, HR say that all our recruits want us to have a strong sustainability performance. And they get all that information. And once you do that, the rest of the workshop goes like a dream. I have never had this feel, touch wood, fingers crossed, all the rest of it. It has never failed me yet. It gets people on board. And I could put up a PowerPoint presentation, like a slide, like I did a few minutes ago, and say, these are the drivers, these are the reasons why you have to take sustainability seriously. And they go, oh, yeah, right. And it doesn't really penetrate into the brain. If you ask them what they think those drivers are, it gets right in there. So try it, it works. So that's idea number three. Number four, which is a bit of an extension of this, is I don't write sustainability strategies for other people. I help them write their own sustainability strategy. And in particular, I insist that we get a session with the board. I go through that thing in trick number three, idea number three, and then we go through a process that I'll show you in a minute to involve the leadership in the organization in designing the bones of the sustainability strategy. So here's a quote that's sometimes it's attributed to Benjamin Franklin, but like all these quotes, it sort of bounces about. But it's tell me and I forget, teach me and I remember, involve me and I learn. So I mentioned workshops already. Masses of almost all my consultancy involves getting people around a table, post-its, flip charts, all that stuff, and structuring the session around that. And then my consultancy bit is writing it up and putting a bit of sort of sparkle magic dust on top of it. And obviously, I'm pushing the way. This was a workshop I ran they were waste managers in County Durham looking at how to engage the public. So you'll see the nice pictures of houses and different types of families and what buttons you might want to press for different types of families. But if you involve people in the session, they get it far more. You get that buy-in. I have twice had chief executives halt those workshops that I was talking about with the top leadership and say, I don't think we are being ambitious enough. I think we need to up our game here. And it's it's amazing. That doesn't happen the other way around. If you write a strategy and then hand it to somebody and say, what do you think of this? They will chip away at it. They'll water it down. If you involve them from the start, it's happened to me, they will beef it up. Or they can beef it up. It doesn't always happen. It's happened a couple of times. But at least they have that skin. I think I've got a quote. It's coming from John Friedman when he was on the podcast last year. He's an American. He's just retired, but he's sort of an American equivalent of me, which might be an insult to him. He says, get their skin in your game. That wonderfully American way of saying things that are very pithy, powerful statements, but it's absolutely true. If they have to own the strategy, not you, the best way to do that is to involve them. And when I say strategy, this can, if you're doing some local plan for doing this, that, or the other, EV charging or something, involve the people who are making the decisions because then they will make the decisions. And sometimes they make the decisions before you've actually finished the plan. It's a very, very powerful technique. Which takes us on to green jiu-jitsu, which is probably the cleverest idea I have ever had. Um, and I was got a phone call a long time ago from a major engineering company saying, we want you to come and engage with our engineering staff, and we'd like to talk to them about how they could switch off their electronic equipment at home properly and recycle more in order to educate them about sustainability. And I said, can we do something different? Because I'm an engineer and I did not want to stand up in front of other engineers and say, this is how you switch off a TV properly at night. I would have got laughed out of the room. So I'd been playing about with another concept, which is the involvement thing. And I said, well, why don't we engage your engineers by getting them to come up with ideas to solve your sustainability problems? Because that's what engineers do. And the woman at the other end of the phone line said, should we run a pilot session? So I went off to their headquarters, ran a pilot session. Halfway through, she came up to me and said, the energy is in the room. In the room is incredible. We're doing this. And I ended up spending 2 years touring their various sites, doing what I started to call green jiu-jitsu. And the difference is by telling people to recycle more or switch their TV off, it's like boxing. You're trying to beat the message into the other person. Whereas jiu-jitsu experts, apparently, because I'm not a martial artist, apparently adapt their technique to the strengths of their opponent. So if their opponent is tall, they will use a different technique than if their opponent is small. If their opponent comes at them quickly, they will use their momentum to their advantage, all those things. So instead of treating other people as somehow broken that you have to inform and fix and mend and make them think better, you go, okay, you're an engineer, let's talk engineering. Another way to look at it, and this is my second of my two Venn diagrams, is you find the overlap between sustainability and your audience because we are bombarded with messages every day. You know, it's estimated we get hundreds of marketing messages, never mind everything else. So we filter out all the stuff that's not interesting to us. So if you can find that overlap, you get through those filters. And there's always an overlap. These were some interesting articles. Donald Trump, who's called climate change a con job and a hoax, filed an application in Ireland which cited the threat of global warming to build a wall on one of his golf courses. The right hand side is a bit fuzzy. The always climate skeptic Daily Telegraph reported that climate change is going to push down house values. So they don't think climate change is happening unless it's going to affect the price of your house, which bothers Daily Telegraph readers. So it gets on the front page in a positive, from our point of view. It's negative, obviously, from the house owner's point of view, but it's a positive sustainability message because it's hitting the buttons of Telegraph readers. So there's always an overlap. You can always find it. How are we doing for time? Oh, we're doing pretty well. Maybe I can stop going quite so quickly, although the ideas get a little bit more complex as we go on. Now, close the loop, we talk a lot about the circular economy. You might be asking why I've got a picture of a guy fishing there. If anybody's heard of Interface, the carpet company, probably the most sustainable company in the world. And it's almost 10 years. I think, sorry, it is 10 years since I worked with them. Unfortunately, my contacts left. So, because I loved working with Interface because they're so progressive and so innovatively thinking. But they had a project called Networks where they took old fishing nets from third world beaches and recycled them into in their case carpets. And the a third of all ocean plastic comes from fishing gear. So getting that out of the oceans and out of the ecosystems and back into the industrial process is a really good idea. And it's interesting because the companies like Alpkit here in the UK, I know we've got an international audience today, but companies like Alpkit will sell you swimsuits and things like that made out of the same material, which is nylon taken from fishing nets taken literally off the beaches before they can get washed away into the sea. I used to do some work with Johnson Matthey, who are a catalyst company, a lot of working around platinum. And one of the interesting ideas is that road sweepings have a higher concentration of platinum and other precious metals than platinum ore. So it's actually relatively simple to extract platinum from road sweepings compared to getting virgin platinum. So, and if I don't, I hope nobody's squeamish. Some people have started extracting gold from sewage because we do uh, end up ingesting gold from fillings and whatnot, and they do work our way through our system, through the sewage system, and you can get it back out. The platinum, by the way, comes from catalytic converters for cars, which Johnson Matthey do. So the catalyst degrades over time, and all the bits get into the sweepings. So it's this kind of thinking. But the most important thing to me about the circular economy is too many people see it as a form of waste management. That is not how you do the circular economy. If you want to do the circular economy properly, you think about sustainable raw materials. And that pulls the material through the loop. If you try and push it through the loop, you don't know where it's going to end up. It may or may not have a use. But if you're pulling quality raw materials through the loop, you start to get economies of scale and you start to get bend the system to actually try and maintain the value in the material rather than the sort of downcycling you get, people turning plastic bottles into park benches, things like that. Do you really want plastic bottles to turn into plastic bottles? I got told off a long time ago for suggesting that plastic bottles are low grade material. Food grade plastic is actually quite high grade material. Um, you sometimes get told off these things, but that thinking of trying to maintain the quality will deliver a proper circular economy. Right, was that idea number six? I am just going to take a breath, as I said I might, because I have shot through the first bit quite quickly and let you catch up with your scribblings for 30 seconds, and then I will be back on. And I should also have said, don't forget any questions, any queries, stick them in the box at the end. I do try and come in under the hour, but I also hang about a bit afterwards if there's any sort of lengthier debates that anybody wants to have on any of the issues we raise. Okay, so just to re-emphasize, this is not just follow the circular economy. This is think about raw materials. I'll tell another anecdote about this. The first time this penny dropped for me, I was at the annual Composting Association conference, and the keynote speaker was from a really obscure uh, sectoral group called something like the Potting Medium Users Group. So people who grow seedlings and saplings and things in greenhouses, and they need a lot of material to plant those in. And he walked out on stage, jabbed a finger at the audience, and said, "Your problem is you're thinking about disposing of waste, and I'm thinking I need a product." And big long pause, and you could hear this sort of ripple of consternation. But he was basically telling them that they have to think from the beginning is how do they produce a quality compost, not how they can get as much raw material in through the door as possible. So that was seeded a long time ago as well, but it stands true to this day. Okay, number seven. This is a new one for this year. I update them a bit every year. A lot of the favorites stay in there, but this is a new one, which is electrify everything. We are moving from a world powered not by molecules, fossil fuels, or other types of fuels, but to one of electrons. And whether it's cars, heating, the heat pump, bottom left. Um, we've already talked about teleconferencing, and of course, that's what we're doing, or generating electricity. Everything is going electric. And, a lot of people think about biofuels, a lot of people think about hydrogen, a lot of people think about, fossil fuels plus carbon capture and storage. But hands down, across the board, electricity is winning. And one of the reasons why it's winning is electricity is massively efficient. Now, on these two slides, I appreciate I am talking about different input materials, which is one of the confusions. But if you take a diesel bus, of the fuel you put in, you get about 40% goes into motion. The other 60% is lost as heat or various other, friction and various other efficiency losses. An electric bus, if you put in a unit of green electricity, you get 70% back out. Now, this didn't used to be such a big deal because, of course, if you were producing electricity from fossil fuels, then you get the losses there, and then you're losing again. So electric buses wouldn't work so well. But saying as we're generating a huge amount of energy from wind and solar, it comes out as electricity. It doesn't need conversion much. So suddenly that equation gets a lot more attractive. Hydrogen, much hyped by certain sectors, and I have a bit of a bugbear about hydrogen, but if you put a unit of electricity into producing hydrogen, store it, get it onto the bus, convert it back into electricity to power electric motor, you only get 13% out of what you get in. So there's a lot of people pushing hydrogen, particularly for transport, and it doesn't work on that basis because electricity beats it hands down. There are 20 hydrogen buses in London. There are 1,950 electric buses. I think that the statistics speak volumes for that. And then when we're looking at heating, if you put gas into a new gas combi boiler, their efficiency does decline over time. You'll get 90% out of that out as heat. But if you put a clean unit of clean electricity into a heat pump, you get 400% out. So again, you're starting to see these benefits that you lose if you try to sort of use hydrogen again as a heating medium, or even biogas. You don't get as much out as you put in. So electricity is really, really starting to win. And I could talk about that for a long time, but as I say, we're only on idea number seven. So, sorry, idea number seven is electrify everything, first and foremost. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. Well, with this one, which is number eight. If you were eagle-eyed when I put up the books at the start, there was a small, it's more of a pamphlet than a book. It's a short book called Accelerating Sustainability Using the 80-20 Rule. And the 80-20 rule, or the Pareto principle, is that for a lot of cases, 20% of the input gives you 80% of the output. And 80% of any input gives you 20% of the output. So if you look at book sales, say, there's a small number of authors sell gazillion books, and then there's a huge number of people like me who sell a modest number of books. But the market is dominated by the small number of authors, the J.K. Rowlings, the Jamie Olivers of this world, who sell an absolute fortune. Now, one of the principles in the book that I was getting across is we spend too much of our time doing stuff that's in that bottom 80% that only gives you a small amount of output. So something like ISO 14001 soaks up a huge amount of time and effort, but it doesn't actually deliver you very much. Whereas if you put that effort into electrifying your heating or electrifying your fleet, you would get a lot more carbon reduction out more quickly. So proponents of the 80-20 rule say you should really focus very heavily on that 20% because that's what gives you sort of bangs for your buck. Now, the definition of net zero, say by 2050 here, is usually said, oh, we reduce carbon emissions as much as possible and then offset the rest. Offsetting is controversial. We will come on to that in idea number 12. So To try and give some rigor to this, the Science Based Target Initiative will plot a carbon descent curve for you, and but they came up with an average figure that they reckon to meet the Paris Agreement, you need to have cut your emissions by 90% by by 2050, and then you can offset the other 10%. And the question is, why wouldn't you go for all your emissions? Well, it's because, as per the 80/20 rule, it gets really, really expensive as you get into that last few percentage. So I took the this graph and modified it. It had a lot of plots. I just plotted the average figure here, but a lot of studies on the cost of decarbonizing the US grid. And you can see here that as soon as you get to about 80%, and particularly 90%, the costs per ton abated goes through the roof, goes up by virtually a factor of 10 or more. So it's the 80/20 way of looking at this would be do the 80 to 90% reduction and then take the rest of the money and spend it on something else, which will also give you more bang for your buck than trying to squeak the rest of this out. So, those of us in the UK, the government has got a target of 95% reduction in grid carbon intensity by 2030. And lots of us think that's ironically too ambitious, that it'll cost too much, and that it'd be much better tailoring that back a bit and spending the money on other things in the 80/20 rule that give you bang for your buck rather than investing it in this. And that can be controversial to say, but basically, I think I put next slide. This is another one of the new ones. The rule of thumb from the SBTI is 90% reduction, 10% offset. Going for 100% reduction could kill your program. And you might even want to scale that back to 80% reduction, 20% offset on those cost grounds. Or certainly focus on the 80% first, because new technologies, new things might come along in the meantime to help you with the difficult bits. But go for the easy stuff, the big, massive, not just quick, simple wins, but the big, massive chunk of easy emissions, in inverted commas, before worrying too much about getting those last few. Perfection is the enemy of success and all that. So that was number 8. Right, number 9, which is related here as well, is stretch yourself. And here, what I mean is we have to have stretch thinking. Because a lot of people, and I drew the carbon descent curve on the SBTI targets as a continuous line, but I'm now going to contradict that by saying that if you follow a annual target for carbon reductions, there's a big chance that instead of hitting the blue line that you want to hit, you'll start to get diminishing returns because there's only so much you can squeeze out of the system without changing the system. So a stretch target does two things. First of all, mentally, it makes you think of these big, massive leaps, these big changes that you have to make to really get down there. And then secondly, it gives you time to design, build, and commission any capital projects required to get through that system. Sorry, to get to those big leaps rather than lots and lots of tiny steps. So sometimes when people do net zero, they mentally turn it into an incremental target. My argument is don't. You need a series of stretch targets. Here, I've put one interim target in the way, which is useful, because if you do it too long, you can end up with it being somebody else's problem, or people thinking it could be somebody else's problem. Right, I thought there was another case study on here. I will give you the case study anyway, because we've got time, and I think it's a good one because it involves whiskey. The Diageo had incremental targets, and they went on the red curve rather than the blue curve. So they changed to stretch targets and they ended up building two massive anaerobic digesters to take the spent mash from the whiskey distilling process and turn it into clean energy. And it also helps process the mash. It's not perfect for spreading on land. You have to do a bit more to it after that. But it turned a, a problem into sort of two solutions. And the head of sustainability at Diageo at the time told me that there's no way they would have done that under their incremental targets, but going to stretch targets made them think differently. So stretch targets, not just in writing, but try mentally to think of stretch targets as well. And if you've got a net zero by 2050, that's too long. We talk about the timing in the in session two of the of Net Zero Business Academy, and you don't want it to be too far ahead. I've had some real horror stories with that. Then create the future you want to see, which sounds a bit Athena poster for those of us who have green in the bay, but a bit sort of like one of those slightly annoying self-help slogans on Instagram for the younger generation. But this is the most powerful technique I use when I was talking about doing workshops, whether it's with top level board members or whether it's the next level down where we sort of fill in the practicalities of a sustainability strategy. This is the method I use. Because most of us do forecasting. We might say, well, this is the way our emissions are going, business as usual. So let's introduce a load of policies and see what impact that'll have. And we hope that all these policies will add up to something, which I've marked in the green box as sustainability. Now, you can define that as net zero, you can define that as a completely circular zero waste business, however you want to define it, but it's just arbitrary as of now. So that tends to run into all sorts of problems because it makes you look at the problem from today's perspective, not from the future. Now, what I do is I use backcasting, the opposite of forecasting. So we forget about business as usual. We start on the right hand side of this graph. You can see my thing. We define the endpoint. What would the organization look like if you'd met your net zero target? And that's a very interesting question because a lot of people will go, oh, is it going to be different? It's going to be, yep. If you've met your net zero target, what is it going to look like? And then I get them to describe that. And then we step back to one intermediate stage, which if they have an intermediate target, surprise, surprise, I align it with that and say, what would you have to have started doing and stopped doing by the time you get you get to that stage, and then you go back to today and say, what do we have to start doing now to get the ball rolling to hit that intermediate stage? So you work backwards to create a strategy that reads forwards to take you to sustainability. Now, I always say to people, don't worry, you don't have to have everything pinned down. This endpoint, you might end up going a slightly different way, but at least when you do this, you know you're heading in the right direction. And it gives you the scale of the change you want to think. The other real benefit about this is it's fun. It is a really enjoyable thing to do. People love it. And that's why by involving them in this process, in this way, I get chief executives turning around and say, let's be more ambitious. Let's do this. Let's go further, faster, and all this sort of thing. Sometimes you have to rein them in a little bit, going back to the 80-20 rule and all that. But backcasting, I absolutely love. It appeared in the mid 90s in the natural step and then seemed to disappear again. I have never been in a workshop run by anybody else that does backcasting. I don't know why I seem to be the only one I know who does it because it is incredibly powerful. And one of the things it does is it gets you away from what we call the tyranny of the present. So, you know, 2026 been fairly turbulent in geopolitics so far. That can getting caught up in all that can stop you thinking, well, we can't do that because of that and rare earth metals, blah, 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 blah. Whereas it works the other end, says, okay, if everything goes perfectly, we're here. So here's how we get to perfection. And it frees you up from all that mental baggage that we call the tyranny of the present. So that's backcasting. Number 11 is wield the axe, because this is becoming a harsh reality at the minute, is that creating a green economy means destroying the old one. And for some reason, everybody gets really squeamish about this, whereas they don't seem to get squeamish about AI taking a lot of jobs, or when everybody started streaming movies and everybody worked for a Blockbuster when lost their jobs. These revolutions, technological revolutions, happen all the time. You don't get many people shoeing horses and working as blacksmiths and things because the economy moves on. So we have to appreciate that creating what we want will involve destroying what we don't want. The two cannot live side by side. And I think a lot of policymakers haven't quite sort of worked up to that a slump in oil processing, oil refineries, is a sign of success, not a sign of failure. Uh, and we're starting to see this. I should have put the source in this. I got it from a piece on Carbon Brief, where somebody has started to plot the global car sales, and the EVs are starting to impact internal combustion engines, ICEs. So if you follow a linear graph from where we are, so a reasonably conservative assumption, then sometime before 2030, EVs are going to overtake the sales of internal combustion engines. The dotted lines, and I didn't put on the full version of this, is following the same pattern that happened when the car took over from the horse. So the change happened much more quickly. So, but the point again I'm trying to make is, for the EV industry to thrive, to give us sustainable transport, we're going to have to kill off effectively the internal combustion engine one. But the actual idea here for you to take away is you can do this internally. So Interface, who I mentioned before, this is Nigel Stansfield. I think he's just retired actually. Recently, I think I saw his LinkedIn profile saying he's just retired. But they have killed off profitable products which don't meet their mission zero goal. So, in particular, with carpets, traditionally have flame retardants and certain materials. They decided, right, we're not going to do this anymore. So they used it in a creative destruction way. We are going to find a different way to do flame retardant without forever chemicals, which literally will be around forever and are highly toxic. So that level of creative destruction, they're really quite macho about, really upbeat. There's no hand wringing here. It's like, yep, we got rid of them. Didn't want to do that anymore. Let's go and do something more exciting instead. So creative destruction can be a creative act, put it that way. So is that number 10? No, that was number 11. And number 12 is the most controversial one, which is offsetting. And as I say, net zero in itself implies an element of offsetting. And as we saw in the 80-20 idea, which I think was number 8, you'll know better than me, was that going for 100% is not necessarily a wise strategy to take. So that implies if you want to be net zero, you have to do offsetting. So we get every so often these terrible headlines saying that the offset projects are worthless. And this one was quite scary because the Vera carbon standard was regarded as one of the better standards. It has to be said, though, one of the problems was that campaigning by anti-offsetting people led to these offsets going overseas where it's harder to see what they're doing. Um, Things seem to have changed a bit, and now it's established you can offset in your own country. Now, is offsetting a distraction from carbon reductions? This is the thing that people always say, they always rule out, but it's not. The statistics show that people who trade in offsets, people who buy offsets, are actually far better at reducing their carbons than average. So the evidence does not stand up the cliche. So the two, it's not either or. You can easily do both, and people who do both seem to do well. And this is I had Matteo Data from Tide on the podcast in the autumn. Tide's an online bank, and they offset all the time. They offset their entire carbon footprint from the start because they see it almost as an internal carbon tax. So the more they reduce their carbon, the less they have to spend on offsets. They use biochar as an offsetting process because they believe that that's a scientifically more robust and longer term process. So they you paralyze wood waste and then put it into the soil where it becomes part of the soil carbon. That again is controversial, but in a way of looking at it is if you follow the science-based targets target on your carbon reductions, then you're contributing to the Paris Agreement level of carbon in the air. So the offset is a sort of bonus. So if it doesn't work as well as you'd hoped, it's not critical, but it gives you this internal carbon tax to drive change. So I think that's quite a refreshing way of looking at offsetting. Though I do think that offsetting projects need to get their finger out. Fortunately, when there's a large amount of money floating about, there will always be scamsters trying to do something with that untoward to get hold of that money. That has happened in other areas of sustainability as well. So here are those 12. I'll come to the half in a minute. Find the sweet spot of success and base your sustainability strategy upon it. Remove barriers to sustainable behavior with, really do. Just ask people, they'll soon tell you, they'll grump about it enough. Get people to sell sustainability to themselves. Involve people. Use green jiu-jitsu, which is the second of those Venn diagrams. Find, what turns people on. So you talk engineering to engineers. Should have given some of these other examples. In the health sector, we talk about the health benefits of sustainability. And if I'm dealing with somebody who does finance, we translate everything into pounds, shillings, and pence, etc., etc. Close a loop by thinking raw materials. Electrify everything. That's what's winning at the minute. So don't spend too much time unless you find something nobody else has. Don't spend too much time worrying about that. Net zero, 90% carbon reduction. Don't go for 100 because it's going to cost you. Stretch targets. Don't allow incremental thinking. Create the future you want through backcasting. Wield the axe and make offsetting work for you. Right. So if we go back to the workbook, if you've been filling in all those high, medium, lows, I've got a little grid on the second page where it runs low, medium, high upwards and high, medium, low across the x-axis. Just be careful with the high, medium, low because sort of logically you would think it'd be the other way around, but there is a reason for it. And if you write the number of each idea depending on those two rankings you've given them into the boxes, then the best ones for you will turn up towards the top right. So, top right box is for those which have high opportunity, very low risk. The bottom left is for those which are high cost and low opportunity. That's just a little way of filtering them out before we go on to the final exercise. I'll just flip back to the presentation so you can see the 12. If you haven't been filling in high, medium, low, you can just guess. No, we're not too, none of this is precise. It is sort of 80-20 type thinking, and we just sort of go, well, yeah, that'll do as an assessment for this sort of level. And then once you have that, the last bit of the exercises is how we finish every single session. It's the same exercise because it's powerful and it's a kind of mini backcasting. So I want you to think about what are the three most important things you've learned today. Again, how you define it important is up to you. Exciting, practical, it's up to you how you define that. This is all about you, not me. So the second question is for each of those, think looking forward 6 to 12 months, what would you be hoping to do differently by then if you embrace those three ideas? So 6 to 12 months. You can go further if you want, but I think for this exercise, 6 to 12 months is the way of looking at it. And then the last question, going back to the start, is what three actions will you take first? When I mean first, I mean this afternoon, tomorrow, Friday, end of next week is a general rule of thumb as the longest of those. What's the first thing? And these are really simple little actions. This is look up what interface are doing on sustainability. This is um, contact so and so about electrification of our fleet. This is really basic things: contacting somebody, doing some research, finding out what you're doing already within your organization. That sort of level of stuff. Really, really simple first steps. The idea is to try and take these big, broad concepts, because I can only talk broadly because you all work in different areas, and work out what it means to you and how you will start doing it. Because as I always say, even though I've been talking for the best part of an hour, non-stop, pretty much, I'm not interested in the sound of my own voice. I'm interested in you doing things different in your organization. Okay. Then 12 and a half. What's the half? Well, this is again slight sales pitch. So, and I know some people are already involved in this. So because it's the freebie, we have to do the sales pitch after all. So, Net Zero Business Academy, as I've shown, is 10 webinars, uh, 10 hours of training. I do it like this because it's an extremely cheap way of, we don't have to book rooms, we don't have to put on buffets, all that sort of stuff. And I can deliver training to anywhere in the world. So this is the entry level. I also have a sustainability leadership roundtable, which is cross-sectoral peer-to-peer learning. Now, the picture is slightly misleading because it used to be run in events. This is the Biscuit Factory Art Gallery in Newcastle. We used to do it face to face, and it was regional for the northeast of England. During COVID, we took it online, and everybody liked it being online, and it means we can be national or global in how we do it. But it's a peer-to-peer learning. We meet 4 times a year. The we pick a topic, or the members pick a topic, and I facilitate a discussion where we work through that topic and learn off each other. And it's a really powerful practical thing because instead of me going, "Hey, I'm the expert, I'm going to tell you what to do," it's people saying, "Well, we tried that. It didn't work the way we were told to do it, but we find that if we changed it like this, then it actually starts working for us." And that, again, information is gold dust. The most intensive CPD we do is one-to-one coaching. And the price tag of these obviously increases as it gets more, the group gets smaller, and the learning gets more intense. So those are the dates again for Net Zero Business Academy. You get a recording afterwards, so if you can't make one, you can watch it afterwards, and you get the workbook still, so you can work through it all. Obviously, it's better to do it live in the moment rather than just listening to somebody talk on a recording. They all this time on a Wednesday, usually the first Wednesday of the month. There are a few change around because of school holidays here in the UK and stuff to give me a bit of flexibility. There's no session in August, but apart from that, it's roughly the first Wednesday at 2 o'clock London time. And if you want to sign up for this year, we'll give you 25% off if you sign up before the 31st of January. Right. As I say, it's 2 minutes to three. So I've brought it in on time. I know a lot of people want to go, and we're already getting the messages through saying going to next meeting, going to next meeting. If you have any questions, because this one does go at full speed, pedal to the metal, it's very hard to get the questions in. If you've got any questions, I'm quite happy to hang about here for a few minutes afterwards and pick anything up. But otherwise, thank you for coming along, and you'll get an email from me in the next couple of days, probably tomorrow afternoon. It depends when Zoom kicks out the recording to send you through the recording so you can recap anything that you didn't catch as I chuntered past it. But we hope you will enjoy you on Net Zero Business Academy.